Hello everybody, you guys know me, I can't go too long without working on another set of laminate dressers, and these two are in super rough condition, especially the tops. You can see there are many areas where the laminate has swollen and raised, and it's going to take a lot of work to get this flat enough to paint. I'm going to be using one of Fusion Mineral Paint's new colors to do a fun monochromatic look on these dressers, so stay tuned. My name is Angie and I refinish furniture. Sometimes I paint and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. I've had a few questions and comments lately about why I even bother with these old laminate dressers, and one of the most common complaints about laminate is that it just doesn't last. That's literally what people say. Oh, laminate doesn't last. Well, they're still here. They have survived along with all of the veneer mid-century pieces and the solid wood mid-century pieces, and no, there's no denying the fact that they're not as valuable as something that's solid wood or has wood veneer on it, but most of these pieces have solid wood frames, solid wood legs, sometimes they have solid wood handles, and in this case, they have solid wood drawers. Now, I am not in the business of refinishing furniture just for something to do. I'm not looking to just give something a new look and call it a day. My whole purpose here is to save as many pieces as I can from landfills, and these seemingly cheap laminate dressers are the perfect candidate for what I do because they're so often overlooked. People see the laminate, which is what this little decorative door panel is made of. This is actually laminate, so it's sort of a plastic fake wood grain on top of this sort of papery product. That's laminate. But there's more to a dresser than that. If you've got a solid wood frame, solid wood drawers, solid wood legs, in some cases solid wood handles, you still have a decent piece of furniture, so don't overlook this. You can paint it. Now that I've gotten that rant over with, I can begin to describe what I'm doing here. So I started by giving these pieces a good cleaning. They were very dirty. I'm going to be reusing these handles because they're super cool. These machine screws are a bit rusty, so I'm just using some WD-40. I'm going to let that sit for a while and I'll go back later on and wipe them off. And it doesn't take all the rust away. There are products you can buy specifically for that. This was all I had, and it does actually work fairly well. In the meantime, I'm just going to finish cleaning these pieces. Even though I'm going to be sanding this, I want to make sure I get all of this oil and grease and dirt off because I don't want to risk sanding that down into the sort of papery layers of the laminate. Just using a scrub pad here and some cleaner to get the grime and years of dirt off of these handles. I am going to be painting them, so I'm not worried about scratching the white paint that they had on the top. I just want to make sure that they're nice and clean so that the new paint has something to stick to. Now this is my absolute favorite part of refinishing any laminate dresser, and that is when it has solid wood drawers and I get to bust out the 80 grit sandpaper and blast through that fake wood grain. I don't know why they did that when there's real wood right there. There is a bit of a caveat to this, which I've mentioned before. Make sure that you're actually dealing with that sort of papery plastic coating and not real wood veneer, which is different. Sanding through veneer would be a total bummer because veneer actually is wood. This is not wood, this weird coating on top. It's just some sort of, I don't even know honestly what it's made of. If it's plastic or paper, it's kind of this weird, it feels like a combination of both. That's fine to sand through. Sanding through veneer is not the best idea. So I jumped from an 80 grit to a 150, and now this is my final 220 grit sanding. This is the final sanding before I do the gray wash on these drawers. It's often not the most high quality wood underneath that sort of coating on these old dressers, but to me, I'd still rather look at this beautiful wood grain than that fake stuff. Okay, so when it comes to this top, I have to try to sand these raised areas flat, so that includes all around the edges and all of these sort of bubbles. These bubbles would have happened where moisture sat and sort of soaked in and caused the fibers in the laminate to swell. You can't just sand this flat and then paint it because you're gonna easily be able to tell where this damage was, because what will happen is the paint will absorb differently into those soft exposed areas. So what I have to do, I have to get this flat and do a seal coat on it of some sort, like a clear coat or a primer, and then I can paint over it. So you can see where I'm pointing here at these areas that are still brown where everything else around it is gray. Those are areas that are still a little bit raised, so I need to get that perfectly level to make this top flawless. So I'm just going to go in again. I am removing a fair bit of this film. I want to remove as little of the film as possible, but I do have to unfortunately remove enough to get this completely flat. This is now perfectly smooth. I can't feel any difference between the exposed areas and the film part. So that's what we want here. On the areas of the piece that don't have those big bubbles, I'm just doing basically a scuff sanding, so just enough to make sure it's flat and smooth and ready for paint. And while I was doing this side here, I actually noticed this little section that needs to be just glued down again to the wooden frame. I did my first scuff sand with a 150 and I'm doing a final one with 220 just to make sure everything is nice and smooth. This is going to be especially important for the top because it's not going to be perfect, but I want to get this as close to perfect as possible. I don't want someone to look at this top once it's painted and say, oh, there was damage there that she tried to repair. I want it to be very difficult to find, so the smoother I can get it before I paint, the better. So as mentioned, before I paint, I have to use some sort of a primer. So this is a satin clear paint slash primer. It's a spray. What this is going to do is it's going to help seal those exposed areas and give me a nice uniform finish to paint over. Once it's dry, I'm just going to do a very, very light hand sand with 220 just to make sure there's no little dust nibs or anything that settled into it. And now this is properly prepped for paint. I did have to do a little repair here on one of the drawers. Some of the plywood segments have separated, so I'm just pouring some glue in using just a cheap artist brush to push that glue in. You could also use a glue syringe, but I like the brush for something like this. And then I'm just going to clamp it up, let it set up for a couple of hours, and move on to something else while this is drying. I wanted to do something a little bit different. I'm using Hazelwood, which is one of Fusion Mineral Paint's newer colors. I've only used this color once on the backboard of a sort of mid-century style bookcase. I haven't used it on a full piece of furniture yet. And as I was looking at it, I was thinking, I wonder what this would look like as a gray wash, which then led me into this sort of maybe monochromatic idea for this piece. So what I'm going to be doing is painting the tops, the fronts of the frames, and the sides in full strength Hazelwood, like just straight out of the jar. And the drawer fronts I'm going to be doing, instead of a white wash or stain, I'm going to be doing a gray wash. I'm not quite sure how this is going to work yet. I have done monochromatic pieces before, but only with light colors like white or off-white. I've never done gray, so this should be interesting. I already know before I even do it, it's going to be a little bit dark, a little bit moody, and a bit different than what I normally do, but I am excited to try it out. As you can see, the first coat is going on nice and smooth. So far, so good. At the time of filming this, Hurricane Larry was just off the coast of Nova Scotia heading toward Newfoundland and bringing with it a ton of warm, humid air, and everything was taking forever to dry. I really can't wait for fall. I'm going for matte black on this hardware. I'm going to do several thin coats. It's going to hold up a lot better than one or two thick layers. So normally when I'm doing a paint wash, I do a 50-50 mix, and that usually gives me what I need, but I'm typically doing whitewash in those instances. This is a gray wash, and I'm a bit worried about it being too dark and too opaque, so I'm sectioning off a clean, empty Fusion Mineral paint jar into 4 sections. I'm going to do 1 section of paint and either 2 or 3 sections of water. I'm not sure yet. I'm going to start off by doing about a 1/3 paint to water mix and see how that goes. What's nice about doing it this way, where you have actual measurements, is if you run out and need to recreate the same mix, it's easy. You're not having to guess. So I'm giving this a good stir, making sure to mix it really well, and then on to the drawers. I'm just painting this on with a brush like I would put normal paint on, making sure to work quickly. Once I have the top coated, I'm going to take a clean rag and wipe off any of the excess, continually flipping the rag over to a clean area. So it's looking a little bit like it would if I had used something like Minwax Classic Gray. It does look like a stain, which I do like, but there is something you need to know about doing any sort of paint wash, and that is raising the grain. So you can either raise the grain before you do it by brushing on just a light coat of water, wiping it off, letting it dry, and then sanding off any of those areas that sort of raise up. I was a bit worried about this gray wash being dark, so what I opted to do is just go right at it with the gray wash, let it raise the grain, and then do a light sand off, which will actually take a little bit of the paint off with it and just sort of lighten the whole look. So you have options here. I'm going to be doing the solid wood legs in the same way as the drawers, just sanding them down to a final grit of 220 and then brushing on my paint mixture, my paint water mix, and wiping it back. Once the gray wash is dry, like I said, I'm going to go in. This is a 320 grit now, just very fine, and just sanding enough to get off those areas of grain that have raised up a little bit, and it also lightens it a little bit. My first coat of paint was almost dry, and then a huge gust of wind blew a bunch of raindrops from the tree in our driveway all over my fresh paint. So now I have to let this dry, give it a very light hand sand, do my coat all over again. Yeah, thanks Larry. On the plus side though, I realized at this point that I had forgotten to glue and clamp that little corner, so I'm doing that while this is all drying. The rusty screws have been sitting in the WD-40 for a little while now, so I'm ready to wipe them off, and I did get quite a bit of the rust off actually. I was impressed. It's not specifically for that, but I have found that it does a decent job at doing it, removing the rust. And a couple of hours later, I was ready to do this top all over again. So like I said, things are drying very slow. It's very humid today. So instead of about a 2-hour recoat time, I'm doing about 4 hours. So I ended up doing on the top the clear coat, 1, 2, 3 coats of paint. I'm using Fusion's beeswax and hemp oil combo on basically everything. Here I'm applying it to the drawers, and you can see it changed the color a little bit. It made it a little bit browner, which I did like. I'm not sure how I feel about Hazelwood yet. It's a beautiful warm gray, don't get me wrong, but it has a bit of a almost like a mauve or even a lavender sort of tint to it, just the slightest, and that's not typically a gray that I would like. But as you can see, once I add the beeswax and hemp oil mix, it brings out more of the brown tones in the gray, which I do like. And you can really see the difference here where the left side is obviously not treated yet, the right side is. They look like totally different colors, and I much prefer the one on the right. Personally, that's my personal opinion. I'm quite happy with how this top turned out in terms of hiding that terrible damage that was there. There's a few areas where you can just see like the slightest hint of it, but overall I'm stoked at how this came out. This sort of one color monochromatic color scheme, especially in the gray as opposed to something lighter like white or off-white, it's not something I typically do. I'm still not sure how I feel about it. I do love how these pieces turned out. I think they look beautiful, and they no question look better than they did. I do realize that this look is not going to appeal to everyone, but it is something I might try more of in the future. And it's good to break out of our own molds every now and then and try something different. I want to take this opportunity now to thank you awesome folks who have sent me teas over the last few weeks. It's a great and relatively inexpensive way to help support the channel, and I just think it's so cool that people from all over the world want to help support what I do, and yeah, so I just want to say thank you. If you're joining me for the first time and have no idea what this tea business is, there is a link in the description box below, as well as links to most of the products that I use. So often in videos I get asked, oh, what paintbrush are you using, or what kind of paint, what type of sealer, and I try to list as many of those in the description as I can, so make sure you're reading those descriptions, especially if you see something in a video that you like, because you may find more info down there. Thank you so much for sticking with me so far. The time has come to have a look at what we started with and the terrible damage that was on the top of these two dressers. I think I've sorted out, and while I understand this color combo might not be for everyone, please be kind. I get that it may not be everyone's cup of tea, but you know, sometimes I just want to try something different. So I quite like how it turned out, and now I'm ready to show you how it turned out.